Okay, everybody, it is now 2 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and get started. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. My name is Ashley Shannon, and I'm the Operational Excellence Leader at the State Emergency Management Agency. I'm so happy you guys could be here today for this course titled A Guide to Utilizing Evolving Probabilistic Winter Forecast and Impact-Based Thunderstorm Warnings. Could you guys have, could we not have cut that down just a little bit even? I don't know. Anyway, I would like to turn it over to our hosts. We have Christine, Steve, and Kevin. So over to you guys.
Awesome. Thank you, Ashley. I'll be going first here. And unfortunately, Andy Bailey, for those of you that don't know or that know him over in the Kansas City area, he wasn't able to make it this afternoon, but the three of us will run the show. And yeah, we're scientists, so we like really long titles. It just makes us sound smart, I guess. I don't know. I don't know. It's just what we do. But thank you, Ashley. And so, yeah, I'm Kevin Deitch. I'm the warning coordination meteorologist out of the office here in St. Louis. And you will see Steve and Christine here in just a bit. But I'm going to talk first about some probabilistic messaging and just some tools that we've developed that you all are hopefully aware of. And if not, we'll introduce you to them. And I'm hoping they can help you make better decisions. So we'll go ahead and get started. And I don't know if Ashley had mentioned this, but if you have questions throughout, throw them in the chat box, and we'll hopefully get to them towards the end of the presentation. We're hoping to leave some time at the end for some discussion and for some questions. So probabilities, you think of probabilities, for some of you that might be scary. Oh, it's math, math is never fun. But we use probabilities all the time, whether you go to a casino and you're gambling versus the percent chance of thunderstorms, you hear about that all the time. We put that out here. Whether you play the lottery or in the stock market, you get news from a doctor of some sort of diagnosis and they use a probability, chance of it occurring. And I'm a big sports guy, so March Madness is always a big one. What's the probability of teams winning and advancing on and winning the tournament? So all walks of life, and that's just to name a few, but we use probabilities all of the time, whether we realize it sometimes or not. And so for weather specifically, we've made a lot of advancements in technology. You think back even just a few years ago, and sometimes you still see this on TV, the European model and the American model, and which one's gonna win. They're showing different things, which one's gonna be right. But a lot of people don't realize we actually have access to over 100 models, and we use all of them now to leverage what they're saying and to give us actual information. So here on this next slide, it really kind of goes to show how we can, how we can use this, but I'm going to first use a baseball kind of metaphor here. So I'm a Cincinnati Reds fan, hence my Cincinnati stuff behind me, Bengals and Bearcats. That's the university in Cincinnati. And unfortunately, I'm a Reds fan living in Cardinals country, but that's okay. So here's our empty Reds stadium, which it normally looks like because we're usually really bad. But let's use a baseball analogy for how these probabilities can maybe help you and maybe just a way to visualize it. So, we're tracking the batter's hits here, and they always seem to hit to the right side of the field, right field. And over time you can kind of watch that and wow, and you run some stats on it. Well, they only hit to left field 10% of the time. They only hit to center field 10% of the time, and they hit the right field pretty much 80% of the time. So you as a coach, what are you going to do? Well, you're going to move your resources for that 80%, right? You're going to employ what's called the baseball shift. So, this is how you normally have your people spread out. But now you're going to move the center fielder a little bit over. You're going to move your left fielder over further. You're going to move your shortstop to cover where the batter hits the most. What's the most likely place that the batter's going to hit? Well, when you think about snowfall amounts, it's really not too much different. So let's say we have 10 models, and there's one model that says we're going to get 0 inches of snow. There's another model that says we're going to get 10 inches of snow, but those are the outliers. Those are that 10%. 10% chance it could occur, but it's not very likely. So we're going to really plan and we're going to really dial into what's the most likely. And that's these amounts anywhere from basically 4 to 7 inches. And so that is what you as emergency managers, DOTs, whatever it might be, should be preparing for. That 80% chance, that amount that's most likely or 80% likely to occur. Now, could you get the outside 0 or 10? Sure. And that happens, but it's very rare. And so, when you're preparing, we want to give you the information that you can use to really prepare. So, just a kind of a fun example to kind of show what we're doing and how we can use these. So when we actually look at it with our models, this is kind of what it looks like. So each one of these dots here on the left-hand side of the screen represents a model forecast for snow. So anywhere from 0 up to 6 inches. And so we can take all that, there's a ton of dots in there. You can see there's some clustering of the dots. So we can take all that and apply some math to them. And we can come up with all sorts of stuff. We can give you what the 10th percentile is. So basically a 90% chance that the snow's over this bottom amount. Or we can give you all the way up to the 90th percentile. So basically a 90% chance that it's going to be less than that amount. And we can give you the most likely, our forecast, the 50th percentile. There's all sorts of different things that we can give you. If you want just one number, we can give you our official forecast. But if you want more of a, a more realistic range, or the what we call the 25th to 75th percentile, we can give you that as well. We can also give you a best case, worst case scenario, which in this we tend to use the 10th and 90th percentiles to come up with that. So it's nice because all sorts of different information can flow out of this, and I'm going to show that here in a minute. So using another sports analogy, let's talk football. So what we can do with this information and with all these models that we have now, we can actually give you the kind of best case and worst case scenarios. So here on the left-hand side, for an event, you may remember this was back last February, that big snow that we had in early February of this year. This left-hand side represents you're going to get at least that much amount. That's kind of the best case scenario. So I'm here in St. Louis. Best case scenario in St. Louis for that event was 5 inches. That we were at least going to see that. We'll go to the right-hand side. So the right goalpost now, the worst case scenario was 12 inches, about a foot. So that's kind of the worst case, high-end amount. And then our forecast is usually that range that we identify typically in the middle of those two. So, bet if you're contingency planning, you're going to at least get 5 inches. So you better be calling in a lot of people because that's your best case. Worst case, you get up to a foot, and then the most likely is between about 7 and 11. So hopefully that gives you just a little bit more information of what we're expecting with each event. So with these different systems, now there are times where we're really confident in the forecast, and there are other times where, man, we're right on the edge of that real heavy snow. So we could see anywhere from maybe nothing to 8, 9, 10, 11 inches. And so it's important for you all to know that this is a general rule that the more narrow the range or the more narrow those goalposts, the higher the confidence is in the forecast. So you can see here on the left-hand side, these ranges are anywhere from 2 to 4 inches, 3 to 5 inches, right? They're pretty narrow, 1 to 2 inch ranges. Whereas on the right-hand side, it's a whole different story. This was one of those systems that was going to be a big old system, it's going to drop a lot of snow, but there are questions with just how far north it was going to make it. So you can see along the gradient where if it went just a little bit further north, a little bit further south, wherever that gradient was going to set up, you have these really wide ranges. And that's just because our confidence in that area is pretty low. We just don't know if it goes 20 miles further north, you're going to get a foot, 20 miles further south, you're not going to get anything at all. So that's why the ranges can sometimes be pretty large, but that's telling you that there's something else going on. There's maybe 2 scenarios that are equally likely. And that we can kind of convey that to you, that's something we're kind of keeping an eye on, and we're going to have to dial in the forecast further. So the more narrow the range, the higher the confidence. The wider the range, the lower the confidence in our forecast. All right, so Ashley, if you don't mind, I have the first survey question here. So you guys should see a survey question pop up, but if you take a look at this map, so we're going to say that you're in Marshalltown here, Marshalltown, Iowa. And we're calling for 3 to 10 inches of snow. So my question to you is, how useful would a forecast of 3 to 10 inches of snow be to you? Would it be A, not at all, B, not very, C, somewhat useful, D, very useful, or E, extremely? So A through E, go ahead and type it in there. You should have seen something pop up. And go ahead and put in your answer there. We're just trying to get some feedback from you on, is this useful? Even though you're on the edge of the gradient there, it's a pretty wide range. Is this forecast useful at all?
Okay, so I don't think you can see this, can you? The survey poll?
I can, yeah, and actually I see the responses coming in.
Oh, okay, yeah, we're up to almost 30, so it looks like somewhat is definitely in the lead.
Give everyone another minute or two. Pull that out. Looks like the responses have kind of slowed down. So So some of you may remember we actually sent out a survey a couple of months ago, back in the early summer about this, and here were the results for that exact same question. We surveyed about 2,500 people. A good amount of those were emergency managers like yourselves. And actually, the results that we just got were very similar. And it surprised me a little bit. I thought maybe on your end, 3 to 10 inches, that's not really useful at all. Like, what am I going to do with that? But the results are a little surprising. So most folks said either somewhat, very, or extremely useful. So they were at least somewhat useful, some very, some extremely. So that's encouraging to see. I think if we keep doing this and educating folks that the range is wide because our confidence in just where the snow is going to set up is fairly low. And I think the more we educate folks on that, then the more useful this can be. All right, so one more question sort of related to that. And Ashley, if you want to pop up the next one. So what amount of snow would you prepare for with that 3 to 10 inches of snowfall forecast? What are you prepping for as an emergency manager? And if there are any DOTs on here, what are you prepping for? So I don't see that one popping up yet, Ashley.
I'm trying to type it. Sorry.
Oh, no worries.
I didn't realize you were going to go so quickly. I'm trying.
Keeping you on your toes. There it is. So yeah, if you want to go ahead and throw in your thoughts there.
What would you say on this one, Kevin? What would your answer be?
So this one's a tough one, and this is where we're trying to gather some data, because I think the logical answer to this is 6 to 7, and that looks like where most people are saying that their answer is. But I think a lot of it's your risk in your community. If you're a pretty vulnerable community, you might be preparing for that 10-inch amount, right? Because you're going to need resources if you get those 10 inches, and so you want to make sure you're prepared. Whereas maybe you're not. You have a lot more resources right at your fingertips, so you don't really need to prepare too much in advance, and maybe you just kind of prepare for the low end and then adjust as necessary. So there's really no right or wrong answer to this one. I'll say from a meteorological standpoint, sometimes when we have ranges like this, and this case was a good example, it's almost going to be 1 to 2 inches or a foot. There's really not going to be, there's kind of two scenarios, and sometimes the ranges can be really wide when really there's just two scenarios. It's either going to be not much at all or a lot, because like I said, it's just where that gradient's going to set up. So that's on us to communicate that to you all, and that's why we have conference calls and things when we have winter storms, to be able to give you that kind of information. But just looking at a 3 to 10 inch range may not give you that detail that you need. All right. So the survey result for that one was, again, similar to yours. So this is good. We're kind of seeing some consistency with our broader results to what you all are saying. But yeah, so the midpoint was the winner. And again, that makes the most sense. I totally understand that. The planners, there's certainly some planners, about 25% said the high end amount, and anywhere from 7 or 8% said the low end amount, with a couple saying other. So yeah, thanks for that feedback. That really does help us kind of gauge where we're at with some of this. So another great way to visualize this information, and we're trying to do a lot more of this, is instead of giving you ranges, we're trying to understand your thresholds. Do you put plows on at 2 inches? Do you bring more people in at 4 inches? Do you, at 12 inches, is there something that you do? Trying to learn what your thresholds are, and then we can give you this kind of information. Well, in St. Louis on that particular snow, we had a 60% chance of 8 inches of snow. That's pretty darn high, right? So, if you're prepping, you're going to get probably 8 inches of snow. It's at least likely that you see 8 inches of snow. Even 12 inches of snow, a 13% chance. So can't completely rule that out either, right? So we can do that for all sorts of different 1, 2, 4, 8, 12 inches of snow to help you guys make your decisions. This is another way we can look at it. So we can actually give you this bar graph of these different, so your snow amounts are here at the bottom. So anywhere from just a trace of snow or 1/10 of an inch all the way up to 18 inches. And what is the percent chance of each of those occurring? So 1/10 of an inch, guaranteed. You're going to get 100% chance of that. And we'll go to like 6 inches here. Chance of 6 inches of snow, about 65%. So if 6 inches is a big threshold for you, it's 65% chance it's going to happen. So it's likely it's going to happen. You probably should prepare for that. So just different ways of visualizing this information, but we're trying to have it all at your fingertips. All right, so we're going to do kind of a case study of what this looked like back last February. And again, our office is doing this, and then the other offices are starting to get in this as well. So you're going to start to see similar type progressions as we get closer and closer to winter storms. So 5 days out, you may remember seeing some of these graphics. You know, we stay really broad brush, right? We're 5 days out. We figured there was going to be some mixed precipitation of rain, sleet, freezing rain, and some snow. So where exactly that sets up, we don't know yet 5 days out. So we can't really get too specific. We were starting to dial in where the worst was going to be in these darker colors, and then, you know, progressively not as bad as you got to the lighter colors. And then you go to 4 days out from the storm. Then we start dialing in a little more detail. You got the county level on there now, kind of showing where the greatest threat of snow and sleet is, but we're still not quite there to really dial in amounts yet. We're still 4 days out. And I'll tell you, in these mixed precipitation events, where you have sleet, freezing rain, it's really tough to dial in amounts, you know, 5, 6 days out. It's not really something we're capable of doing quite yet. So now we get to 3 days out, and, you know, now we can start dialing in those percentage chances of certain amounts. So here's your threat of 6 inches of snow, and you can see we were pretty high on the scale here. Now, my one nitpicky thing with this graphic is I'd like it to be labeled. Is high 100%? Is it 80%? What's high mean? And what's low mean. So we'll assume it's 0 to 100%. So these dark colors basically are guaranteeing up by I-55 in Illinois that you're going to have a 100% chance of at least 6 inches of snow, with, you know, maybe 80-90% chance basically from Columbia up through like Quincy. So we're starting to dial in some amounts for you. You guys get an idea of kind of what we're thinking 3 days out. Now we go to 2 days out, and now we're giving you the actual percentage chances of at least 8 inches of snow. So again, that Columbia to Pittsfield area, you know, 80-90%, 2 days out of at least 8 inches of snow. That's pretty good chances. And then we also try to highlight where are we uncertain. So in this red box, that's where we were expecting the significant sleet. And when we get sleet, as you all probably know, the more sleet you get, the less snow you get. The less sleet you get, the more snow you get. And so that's kind of what we were expecting really near the St. Louis area with this event, at least 2 days out, that we were going to see some sleet mix in, and just how much was going to depend, you know, just how much mixed in was going to affect how much snow we were going to see. And then finally we get to the day before the storm, and you could see we were still pretty uncertain. St. Louis seems to never fail. The I-44 corridor was kind of in that mix of, you know, where we're going to see more rain, more sleet, freezing rain, that kind of thing. So we were pretty confident we were going to see at least 4 inches, but we could see all the way up to 11 inches or so. And so that's why the range was pretty small. And this was the area we really highlighted of the highest uncertainty, just because of the mixed precipitation we were going to expect. But, you know, if that 4 to 11 just doesn't do it for you, you're like, man, that's too large of a range. I need to make decisions. You can go back to these graphics. So you can go and look at St. Louis. Well, here on the left-hand side, this was our chance of at least 4 inches of snow. So 80% chance of at least 4 inches of snow. So if you're planning, you should plan for at least 4 inches. You know, 80% chance that's going to happen. Then you go up to 8 inches of snow. We had about a 50-50 shot of at least 8 inches of snow. So I think that helps give you an idea of, you know, even when we have these larger ranges, you can dial into these specific thresholds and get the percent chance to really help yourself, you know, plan and prepare if you actually need values at that point. Then we go to the day before, or I think this was actually the night before the storm started. So technically the day of, as the storm ramped up later that night. And we had dialed it in then, right? We were much closer. We were more confident we were going to see more snow and less of that sleet. And so we kind of went to instead of the 4 to 11 inch range, now we're 7 to 11. We were able to dial in that range a little bit more. We got closer to the event, and things kind of came more into perspective. So that's just an idea of kind of how it plays out over time. Just a case example that we had just this past February. So some other ways it's being used. We're not really doing it just for winter, although that's probably the most seen and the most visible. But we can do it for really all sorts of stuff. So this was back when we were starting to get in some drought concerns there in mid-July, late July. And so we were showing let's at least get half-inch of rain. So here were the percent chance of getting half-inch of rain. So you can see Quincy had the highest up at 66%, and it was unlikely everywhere else. So one way of using it, just rainfall, how much rain we're going to see and the chances that we see it. Another way, how hot might it be? So what's the chances that we exceed 100 degrees in Columbia? 33%. What's the chances that we exceed 90 degrees in Columbia? It's 98%. So we're going to definitely be 98, at least 90 degrees with a 1 in 3 chance of getting to 100 degrees. So all sorts of information we can use this for. So that was just a few examples of where we're kind of headed. But what we need from you all and where you can help us with this, or what are your thresholds? I'll pick on St. Louis County here. So one thing that we notice in the city and in the county that we've worked with St. Louis on is, trucks tend to get stuck on I-44, and that there was discussions of some of our storms. Maybe we pre-stage some resources there because we know that just is a bad area. There's a big hill there, and it's tough for them to get up it. So what if you use you notice that it's usually about 4 to 6 inches that these cars and trucks get stuck. Well, when the chance of 4 inches reaches a certain threshold, maybe that's your cue to pre-stage resources there. And I'm sure there are things like that in your communities where you can think of the certain amount of rain causes me problems, or this certain amount of snow causes me problems. And so we can derive probabilities for those thresholds that you have to help you make your decisions on staging resources and things like that. So just an idea thrown out there of ways this can be used. So that is pretty much all I have. We really need your feedback on this. And so as we kind of dive more into this realm of using our probabilities and all these models that we have access to, what's working for you? What's not? Yes, we have some large ranges, but are those still somewhat helpful? Especially if we kind of give them to you in context of 2 scenarios, and that's why the ranges are so large. What we don't want to do is give you, it's going to be 8 inches, but in the back of our minds, we're like, that's just a number we threw out because they wanted a number. I had to give them a number, but the chances of 8 inches actually happening are pretty low because there's so many things that could happen at this point. So we want to give you as much context to the forecast as we can, but not confuse you. And so I think it's a fine line. So that's really all I had. I think, Ashley, what might be easiest is we'll just go to the next presentation. So I'll turn it over to Steve and Christine here. And then if folks have questions, they can ask us all questions at the end. So let me switch presentation. Perfect. All right, and let me get my mug off the camera here. And Steve, I will turn it over to you.
Okay, well, thank you, Kevin. Actually, Christine is going to kick us off on this particular topic. Christine, go ahead.
Thanks, Steve. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Christine Welgus. I'm the warning coordination meteorologist at the National Weather Service in Paducah. So we serve all of Southeast Missouri, far Southeast Missouri. So what Steve and I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking to you all about is wireless emergency alerts. I think probably by now, all of you probably know what they are, but most cell phones these days have these WEA alerts. Depending on your phone, on how to set these up and where to find the settings, it's going to be different on Apple versus an Android phone. But I believe, and I'll kind of go into this in the next couple of slides, that these were a lifesaver when it came to the December 10th, 2021 tornado. And I say that because not everybody has a weather radio. A lot of people out there still rely on sirens, believe it or not, to be their sole source of information. And one of the things that the National Weather Service tries to convey is that you need to have more than one resource when it comes to obtaining warnings. And as is the case with a lot of tornadoes, at least in our area, the tornadoes occur at night. And so, that notion that, hey, I'm going to see it before I need to take shelter kind of goes out the window. So having these wireless emergency alerts and making sure people know about them, making sure people understand when they're going to get alerts and when they're not going to get alerts, and how to set it up on their phone, how to check and make sure that they are set up to receive these alerts is very important. So next slide, if I can change slides. Yeah, it must be you, Kevin. Thanks. So this is an image I took from a Black Hawk helicopter doing the aerial survey for the tornado that went through most of Western Kentucky on the night of December 10th, 2021. And, you know, seeing the pictures there of downtown Mayfield just bring back a lot of memories. For me, I just gotten into the position 5 days before this tornado struck. And it was, there are no words really to describe what these people went through. But I will tell you that for the number of people that I talked to, it was their phones that got them, you know, at least looking at what was going on, turning on the television, and, you know, knowing where to go, knowing what to do is, you know, one of those things that they wouldn't have had any inclination to do that if they did not have the warning. And so I do believe that the WEA really helped in saving lives this particular night. Because a lot of people, their phone, if it's not on their phone, it's not occurring, right? And, you know, I don't know what the population of weather radios is in this area in parts of Western Kentucky, but I did hear about people who had no desire to stay up and watch the weather. There are people that went to sleep that night and were woken up by their phones. You know, they didn't have a weather radio. They didn't have the TV on. They had no idea it was coming. And the only source that they had that it was, you know, bearing down on them, this mile wide, high end EF4 tornado was coming, was because their phone went off. So next slide, Kevin. So again, wireless emergency alerts, if you're not already pushing these as emergency managers on your websites, on your social media sites, you know, I hope that, you know, today's presentation really kind of brings to light how important these are. And Steve's going to go into a little more detail on what they are and what alerts you're going to get them for and what you're not going to get them for. But for us at our office, we lost power on the night of December 10th. And gratefully, we are very grateful that Springfield, Steve's office there in Springfield, took over for us. And there was no degradation of services other than that the weather radios for certain parts of Kentucky were not working. So really, the only way people were going to receive the warnings was through the cell phone at that point, once we went down. And so the TV broadcasters did a phenomenal job in working in concert with us to get that message across, to people that this was not your ordinary tornado. This was a killer tornado, a mile wide monster, or what we nicknamed it, the beast. And I just think that it's important to understand and recognize that the WEA, or the wireless emergency alerts, were likely one of the things that prevented us from probably doubling or tripling that number of fatalities, even though we had 57 people who died during this tornado. I think it could have been a lot worse if it weren't for WEA. So I think the next slide is probably, okay. So as many of you know, or maybe you don't know, all tornado warnings, no matter what kind of tag is applied to them, will make the WEA alert. So it will alert your phones. So now if it's a tornado emergency, which is what happened on the night of December 10th, forecasters were looking at the radar data, seeing what was going on with the past history of the tornado. And for the first time ever in the National Weather Service Paducah's history, we went with a tornado emergency for the city of Mayfield. And for pretty much every warning that followed after Mayfield, and Springfield continued with that nomenclature after we lost power, and continued with emergency as well. And so the wording that will show on the wireless emergency alerts just is open a little bit. You can see there on your screen. But, you know, it's one of those times when it's your last ditch effort to scream with the rooftops and wave that white flag and say, it's coming, it's bad. You know, you need to take shelter. You need to do something to protect yourself. And so that's why this was a once in a lifetime event to utilize that tornado emergency. And like I said, having it going over a wireless emergency alert definitely saved lives. It's all yours, Steve.
Okay. Well, thank you, Christine, for kind of setting that up. So this whole idea of trying to provide an indication of just how bad the storm is going to be, let's go back for a couple decades. that Christine had indicated on December the 10th actually had occurred in 1999 down in Moore, Oklahoma. And it was their local attempt to try to say, this time it's going to be horrible. And, you know, we occasionally do see these historic tornadoes, but of course, most of them are much weaker. And also, most tornado warnings, I should say, do not result in tornadoes. So the Weather Service was faced with a situation of how do we portray information to our partners, to the public, that a higher degree of confidence exists, maybe a higher degree of impact exists. So going out of the Joplin tornado and some of the events that occurred that same year in the southeastern part of the United States, this whole idea of impact-based warnings came to fruition. At the bottom of all of our tornadoes, thunderstorm, flash flood warnings, there are so-called tags that give you some information. And Kevin, if you'd like to advance the slide so that I can get the first little box up here. Thank you, sir. So the very first thing when it comes to tornadoes that we want to do is provide a degree of confidence. Is the warning based off just radar, or has a spotter confirmed that tornado on the ground? And that was one of the things that the social scientists told us are very, very important. If you can confirm the threat, people will respond quicker. And by that, they won't go outside and take a look at what's coming towards them. Next box, please. So once we can say it's either radar or observed, now is the opportunity that we have to tell you how bad is it going to be. So there's so-called based tornado warnings, there's considerable warnings, and there's catastrophic warnings. And as you can imagine, the language associated with a base versus considerable versus catastrophic does go up in those warnings. Now, if I can put you in the situation in which you're sitting behind the radar, you're trying to determine whether or not to issue a warning. You see enough rotation indicated on the Doppler radar, and I am convinced a tornado is imminent or perhaps already in progress, so I push that button. The tornado warning goes out. This is a so-called base warning. I'm convinced it's imminent. Though there are different days in which the environment just is screaming at us. You know, there's going to be a lot of wind shear, a lot of instability. And because of that, there's probably going to be some strong tornadoes. So it's up to the radar operator to provide that degree of confidence when it comes to using the considerable tag. This does not necessarily mean a tornado is on the ground yet at this point. It's just the environment's there, our confidence is there, but it may or may not be on the ground. On the other hand, when we issue a catastrophic tag, which will lead automatically to a tornado emergency language being put into that warning, the environment is there, radar's indicating it, and a spotter has confirmed that tornado on the ground. The whole goal of this is to work within the system to convince the public that they need to take shelter immediately. Don't second guess. Don't go outdoors. Don't call your neighbor. Instead, just immediately go to shelter. We've heard in the voices of the TV meteorologist that when we do a tornado emergency, that voice changes. You know, it's the push to finally get people to do what we absolutely positively need them to do. The next tag, please, Kevin. There's also the opportunity to use a severe thunderstorm warning with a tornado possible tag. This is for situations in which we're trying to send you a message. We're trying to send the message that there is a storm on radar, it is rotating, but we're not quite convinced it's going to produce a tornado. So the so-called tornado possible tag may be used to give you a little bit more of a heads up that we're getting close, but we're not quite there. And Kevin, if you'd like to go ahead, again, all this information is going to be found at the bottom of our warnings. It's purposely designed to be put there so that you can get that information very, very quickly. You don't need to reading through all the text in order to get those tags. Next slide, please. Now, we can also utilize these so-called tags for severe thunderstorm warnings. And as Christine just indicated, there is an opportunity to use the wireless emergency alerts that are in cell phones to indicate levels of threshold. So if you consider a severe thunderstorm warning a so-called base warning, 58-mile-per-hour winds, 1-inch hail, there's a lot of warnings, severe thunderstorm warnings, that have that degree of impact. But severe thunderstorms can and do become much, much more impactful. You can see two other categories there on the screen: considerable at 70 mile per hour and golf ball size, or 1 3/4 inch, or in a very rare case, destructive, involving 80-mile-per-hour winds, which is just as strong as about 2/3 of all tornadoes, and or the possibility of baseball-size hail, and that's to say 2.75 inches. I think you all will agree that 58 mile per hour versus 80, or 1-inch hail versus 2.75-inch hail, there's different thresholds, different impacts associated with these events. And that is exactly what we're trying to get information out through you, through the TV meteorologist, through automated means, to let the public know what is the level of threat. Kevin, go ahead. So if you could revisit this idea of utilizing cell phones and alerting people through the wireless emergency alert system of the level of impact coming. The National Weather Service will only send out a severe thunderstorm warning via a WIA for destructive warnings. Now, this could be in the warning itself or in the follow-up statement called SVSs, severe statements, such that we can either way let the public know what is the level of threat from that thunderstorm that's approaching. Next slide. How about flash floods? Well, those in the St. Louis area, I'm going to bring you back to maybe a really bad day for some of you guys. So July 25th into the 26th, just this during the summer, remarkable event. This is a once in a lifetime event. So just like tornado warnings, or just like severe thunderstorm warnings, flash floods have different levels of impact. And in the city of St. Louis on this day, this is a historic event, perhaps a once in a lifetime event. So we've got some tags available for y'all when it comes to flood warnings as well. Now, a base flash flood warnings is going to be used for the majority of all flash floods. Now, the environment's there. We're seeing a lot of rainfall pile up on radar. Maybe we're getting some reports of an isolated low water crossing or a state highway flooded, and that's going to result in a dangerous situation, yes, but it's a so-called base flash flood warning, and we're going to have affiliated wording in there to indicate a life-threatening event, but we're not really pushing that button to say it's unusually bad or catastrophic. There are two tags that we can use. Both of these will lead to the WIAs being sounded on those cell phones for, again, considerable and catastrophic. And that catastrophic wording will, like tornadoes, lead to a flash flood emergency. It's all designed to give the partners, the public, additional information that they can use to their advantage to enhance their response, their understanding and response to the various warnings that strike across Missouri. So that's the information that I have. Kevin and Christine, do y'all have anything else to add before we open the door for questions?
I will say, I know I've worked with my EMs a little bit on I'll go back to the slide here, the destructive severe thunderstorm warnings. You think of, we've worked with the media to go, likely they're going to be live on air when these types of warnings are issued for 80-mile-an-hour winds or baseball size hail or larger. And so with them on air, with everyone's cell phones going off via the WIA alerts, I thought it made sense to sound sirens for these. Now, I know there's local politics and things like that go into it, but something for you all to think about if you have siren responsibilities. These are a big deal. You think of the Iowa storm that happened back in 2020. You may have heard of that. We call it a derecho. It's a long-lived windstorm that raked across a good portion of eastern Iowa and northern Illinois. And that was widespread, 80, 100, even some pockets of 125 mile per hour winds. It did all sorts of damage up there. Like Stephen mentioned, higher damage than a majority of our tornadoes do over a much broader swath. So So that's a reason that we're doing this now for severe thunderstorm warnings, because there are high-end severe thunderstorm warnings that do considerable damage, significant damage, and I think folks would appreciate sirens sounding for that so they know they're coming. So.
Yeah, Kevin, I'm glad you said that. Down here in Southwest Missouri, we have a so-called Ozark standard tornado policy that the emergency management community has worked out, and I think different parts of the state have got similar recommended policies. But in our case, it's life-threatening wind, and if a particular jurisdiction determines that 70 mile per hour versus 80 mile per hour, this is where those tags can help them make that determination on whether or not to blow their tornado sirens. Of course, to go along with that, it does need to be advertised. The public does need to understand why the tornado sirens are going off, even though it's just a severe thunderstorm warning. But you're absolutely correct. These are, maybe once in a lifetime type of winds that the public does need to take shelter for. Excellent point.
Otherwise, I think that's all I had. Ashley, I don't know, I haven't seen any questions come through, so.
I do not see any in the chat. I've asked people if they did have a question, they could also raise their hands so we could get them unmuted so they could ask aloud also. So they could be long questions though.
That's okay. We got a little bit of time, so happy to entertain questions, and it could be anything weather service related, folks. It doesn't need to be necessarily these topics. We're happy to answer any questions you have since we have the time.
Are you able to see the chat? There was a question here from Hal. It says, does the label for blizzard watch or warning still exist? And if so, what is the trigger criteria?
I see that one, Hal. I'm a little confused by your question. I think you might mean, will a blizzard warning still trigger WIA? And yes, it does. As far as I know, I don't think that's changed, Steve. Sorry, I thought Hal was saying something else. So yes, when we put out a blizzard warning, everyone's phones do go off to let them know that a blizzard warning has been issued and that a bad winter storm is on the way. Hal, I think that answers your question, but if not, let us know. Other questions?
While we wait for additional questions, I think I do have another point I'd like to try to make in that, this is a partnership opportunity. When we go into a severe weather event, we do want to make sure that you guys know our thoughts, our expectations, not just timing and the type of storm, but maybe even the intensity of event that we're looking at. This is set up in advance by the Storm Prediction Center and some of the information that they're sharing. Certainly continued through our hazardous weather outlooks and our area forecast discussions. We're purposely trying to provide you with as much information that we know, such that you have a better feel for what is the level of event that is going to strike the state. So when we go into a warning mode, we've got NWS chat open, and we're openly talking about if spotters are confirming or what's going on radar in terms of the intensity of the rotation or other indicators. But once we get to that point in which emergencies might be required, in particular for something like flash flood, this is something that we want you all to be a partner with us on. We want you to be able to be comfortable when we say considerable, we say catastrophic, or maybe some of the more enhanced wording within that warning, such that you can talk to your vulnerable populations within your county. Maybe a day in which a everyday tornado watch is issued, and we are expecting tornadoes, but they're not really going to be tornado emergency type of events. This might be a situation where obviously we're going to have to take certain degree of precautions, but maybe not worry too much about other degrees of precautions. On the other hand, when the Storm Prediction Center has a high risk, the Weather Service has done a conference call, and we're telling you this is going to be a historic event in the state of Missouri. These are the days that we are looking for your partnership to help us get information out to the public, not just schools, but businesses, the hospitals, everybody that we combined can talk to. And we believe that the tags also through social media does allow that to continue all the way down to the individual warning issuance and hopefully into the individual home, building, school, etc. So we look forward to working with you all to better utilize these tags and the marketing of these tags such that the public can come to respond better to them.
And thanks for the kind words, Lonnie and Hal. I appreciate it.
To kind of piggyback on what Steve had mentioned, I just returned from the Kentucky Emergency Services Conference from a few weeks ago. And one of the most beneficial things that we did is kind of have a discussion. And we kind of broke up into groups, and we basically asked questions, and each group had to answer these questions. And a lot of them revolved around how we can do better and how we can improve as an agency to better serve you, to help you make decisions and help you spread that word. And there was a lot of good information, low-hanging fruit, I think, even from our end, that, we can do that, or we can change that. And, so it's really, we're here to serve you. And so I think it's important for you all to use, a medium such as this even to say, hey, it'd be nice if, or if I were king for a day, I would love if you can do this. Those types of, feedback is very important for us to know that what we're doing is beneficial to you. And so don't, hesitate to reach out to your WCM or your warning coordination meteorologist or any of your offices and find out, what they can do for you and what they can do to improve things. For one of the things that they talked about for us is the DSS packets that we put out. They wanted us to make sure that we're using plain language and that we're doing the bottom line up front. Just tell me what I need to know. That kind of thing. Just simple things that, a forecaster can take that information and go, okay, now I know how to frame these slides. I know what to say, what not to say. So those types of things can be very valuable in for us to improve, how we serve you. So just wanted to put that out there. Thank you for all for what you do out there, by the way.
Awesome. Thanks, Christine. Great thoughts, great comments. Other questions for us? All right, Ashley, I don't see any.
I don't either. So I want to thank you three for being with us today and sharing your knowledge and information. And hopefully you don't bring on the winter weather too quickly. So let's just hope we don't have to deal with how many inches of snow are we going to get quite yet. We don't want to have it quite yet. So thank you again for your time. We really appreciate it. I'm actually going to stay on the call just to monitor the chat for a little while longer in case somebody was typing a longer question. But thank you guys, and I hope everyone has a wonderful day and a wonderful upcoming weekend.